Woo. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an addict and so grateful to be here with you guys today because it's a big book study. I hope we got our books, but I mean, honestly, if not, I'm just glad you're here. Immediately I say that and everyone's like looking around. Guys, get your books. Get your book on. Big book study. What up? Paul said I could do whatever I want. So we'll come back to that. So where we're going to kick off is right on the title page. Let's start at the very, very beginning of the book. And what's great about my book is that it's falling apart. So this is what the title page looks like. It's title page. And you know that saying, if your book's falling apart, your life probably isn't. You know what I'm saying? Some of you guys do from experience. So the title page, it kicks off saying Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I want to emphasize is that Alcoholics Anonymous is the title of this book. Now, we call this book the Big Book. We give it that nickname. But the title of this book is Alcoholics Anonymous. And as we go through the foreword, the prefaces, the preface, the forewords, as we go through this, we're going to see why that is important. Why it is important that we are named, spoilers, the Fellowship Alcoholics Anonymous, not Cocaine Anonymous, but the Fellowship Alcoholics Anonymous is named after the book, not the other way around. So we are named after the book, or Alcoholics Anonymous was named after the book. This book is important, and that's why we're going to study it. So it says, the story of. And what do I have to share in the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous? Well, what I have to share is my story. My story as it relates to my experience with my addiction, but also my experience as it pertains to the process of recovery, which we will see is the 12 steps. And my experience with the solution, and the solution that we have is a spiritual awakening. And it says how many thousands of men and women. And one of the things I want to point out is when this book was written, anytime we see the words men and women, that was a hopeful and inclusive statement because it was men and women. There was one gal who was hanging around for a little bit and her name was Florence and she didn't make it. You know what I mean? So there was one woman. So when it talks about men and women, that was a hopeful and inclusive statement. They were hoping that more of us gals could make it to the party, you know? Well, not all of them, but some of them were. The wives weren't. You know, the wives of the co-founders, and like the early members are like, let's not get the ladies in here. I know what the boys are like, you know. But when it says how many thousands of men and women, so that was a hopeful, inclusive statement. And it says, have recovered from alcoholism. Make a note of the word recovered, because that is the first promise in this book. Y'all know that there was a promise on the title page? Amazing. Oftentimes we go to meetings and we read the step 9 promises and we title them The Promises. Girl, there are promises all over this book. All over this book. There are promises for many of the steps. There are promises all over the place. And this is the first promise, have recovered from alcoholism. For our purpose, have recovered from the illness of addiction. Have recovered. Now, hold on a minute. If you're somebody that has heard the word recovered and you're like, girl, I'm not cured. What do you mean recovered? Maybe you hear recovered and you think it's some hoity-toity drug addicts and this thing doesn't apply. You know what I mean? I promise you, I am not the hoitiest of the toitiest of the drug addicts. But what does it mean to be recovered? So we're on the title page. Let's take a big old bounce around. Anyone here for that? Actually, if you're not here for that, too bad. Page 84. Let's pop over to page 84. And let's talk about what does it mean to be recovered. And welcome to those just joined us. We started on the title page and we're over on page 84. Because that's how we're going to be doing this until December, when somebody more balanced is going to come to this and do this thing, you know? So page 84, the very bottom paragraph right below the line, love and tolerance is our code. So when we talk about being recovered, what is important to understand is there will never be a time in my life where I can safely ever drink, use drugs, take any mood-altering substance ever again. But there will also never be a time when I cannot be fully engaged in the 12 steps as a way of life. So this is what it means to be recovered. And these are what we call the step 10 promises. See, I said there was more promises. And I love me the step 10 promises. Oh, they're pretty rad, you know? So right below love and tolerance of others is our code. And it says that we have ceased fighting anything or anyone. The fight is over. Even alcohol, even cocaine, even crack, even pills, even opiates, even whatever brings you to Cocaine Anonymous. We have ceased fighting our addiction. For by this time, sanity will have returned. The sanity that we're talking about is that insane thought that I have when I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated. You guys can let me know if you've had a thought like this. This time will be different. Nobody will ever know. My problem is booze, but I can smoke crack like a lady. Paul was thinking that all the time. I just kidding. Yeah, and like, it looks, right? You know what's up. It looks like a thought that takes me back again and again and again to the first drink, the first drug, the first hit, the first hoot, the first high, despite knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt it is ruining my life. And so that thought is gone. That is what it means to be restored to sanity. And it says we will seldom, which means rarely, be interested in liquor, in drugs, in mind-altering substances. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. So if I get a thought, a drink would be nice. If I get a thought, you know, I could use a line. If I get a thought, I could take something to take the edge off. Man, that thought, I recoil. I'm like, whoa. And this is important. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. I'm not raising a mental defense. I'm not trying to think through the drink or play the tape to the end. The thought of, whoa, I don't want to do that happens to me. It says we will see that our new attitude toward liquor, toward crack, toward drugs has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. I'm not avoiding my triggers. I don't have to watch slippery places, which is good because a lot of you guys are in the UK and it rains a whole lot. So that sounds like that'd be an issue. Howard, watch out when you're over there. It might be a little slippery. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm in Calgary. We just get rain. We just get snow. We don't get the rain. So slippery on the ice. So it says we'll see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It's gone. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. So this is not an idea. This is not a belief. This is not like, boy, that'd be nice, like a trip to Disneyland. No, that is our experience. Those of us who are here at the study today, those of us who have recovered from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, this is our experience. I don't fight it. I don't have to play the tape to the end. I don't have to avoid people, places, and things because I don't know if you're aware, I'm a person and I'm in a place. And there's things around, you know, like, whoa, there's an abundance of those. Thank goodness I don't got to avoid them. You know what I'm saying? Position of neutrality. And it says this is our experience. This is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So this is what it means to be recovered. But I want to point something out. Recovered happens not by wishing, not by wanting, not by needing, not by desiring, not by believing. It happens by action. These describe a recovered state. And this recovered state happens at step 10, actively practicing the 10th step and continuing to keep in fit spiritual condition. But that is a promise and that is available to each and every one of us here in this meeting today. Every one of us who have recovered. And that is our experience. Let's pop back over to the title page. And so for me, I got a 4th edition of the book. Now, what I want to point out is for those of us in North America, my North American homies, it's a little blank. There's not a lot happening. Not a lot happening over here. Now, you guys over in the UK, you guys got something we don't. I got this, Paul. You guys, on your title page, you have a little symbol. And what I'll do is I'll screen share the symbol. It's the AA symbol, and it says recovery, unity, and service. And for those in North America, it's like, hey, why didn't we get a little symbol? Well, the truth of the matter is, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship wonderful at sobering up drunks, not so great at copyright legislation. And to be fair, that's not actually true. In the United States, to keep a copyright, you have to defend a copyright right. So that is a logo. And that logo or that symbol, to keep in use, you would have to sue people who use that logo. And that's not really in line with the primary purpose. So in North America, it was taken out. But it hangs around on the proper side of the pond, not the overseas. I'm overseas. You guys are, in your fun books. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share the logo so we can just have a look at it. And this is the symbol, this is the logo, and it's important to understand what I need. I need a program. I need to be fully involved in all sides of this triangle. See, this logo isn't just a pretty little thing, not like me, a pretty little thing. I'm just kidding. I really don't want that validation. This logo is giving us vital information. This symbol is telling us how I need to show up to the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous. So on that triangle, on the base of that triangle, it has the word recovery. And what is recovery in Cocaine Anonymous? Recovery in Cocaine Anonymous is all 12 steps. All 12 steps is a way of life. And that is my foundation. See, it is the base of the triangle. All 12 steps. Step 1, 2, 3, 4 through 9, a daily practice of 10, 11, 12, working this thing as a way of life. That is my foundation. And this is important because if I have not got all 12 steps in my life, I've got no foundation. To have no foundation means I will relapse. I'm going to get high again. I'm going to drink again. I'm going to use again. I'm going to pick up again. I will relapse. So I need to have all 12 steps as a way of life for my foundation. That is my foundation for life, the 12 steps. And I don't know what side of the picture I'm on, but on the one side, it says unity. And unity is going to meetings. Unity is connecting with fellows. Unity is those phone calls and the time together and the conventions. Those of you in the UK are going to see Howard in a bit. You know what I mean? It is that. That is unity. But you'll notice, and it is important. I like meetings. Meetings are great. Meetings are important. Meetings cannot keep me sober. Meetings cannot keep me sober. But I need to be involved. Heck, where else am I going to find a newcomer? They don't traipse around through the basement that I'm in. You know what I mean? I got to go and I got to find them. And it's important to have that connection with others. And then on the other side, we have service. And what does service look like? Service looks like being involved, having a home group. Being involved in the home group. I was going like this because I'm like, Polly, got a home group. It's happened. Whee! But it's like being involved in the home group, having a service position, everything from being the GSR of a group, which is the vital link from the group to world services, that vital link to the treasurer, to the person who makes coffee, who does setup, who does cleanup, who does, Zoom security, who reads, being of service. And if I am proportionally, which is to say equally involved in all three sides of the triangle, what I find is that I have a wholeness. There is a wholeness to my life. There's a wholeness to my recovery, and that is what is symbolized by that circle. And I began to see this. I'll stop the share, but I began to see the symbol in a radically new way. When a number of years ago, sorry, I just was having a mild existential crisis. I was counting the years. I'm like, that was a while ago. But a number of years ago, I got involved in something called Steel on Steel. And if you've ever heard Steel on Steel, not affiliated with AA or CA or any 12-step thing, but if you've ever heard of the AA speaker / CA speaker, Mark Houston spoke about Steel on Steel. He created Steel on Steel, and it was a spiritual exercise where groups would get together. Those of us who are living this spiritual way of life, working these 12 steps, we would get together, and how I would do it in groups of gals. Doesn't have to be like that, but that's how I ended up, in groups of gals. And we would meet once a month, and we would talk about sharing specifically where we were at in our spiritual lives. And what would happen is that the other people in the group would give us considerations to take back into prayer and meditation over the course of, for us, it was a month that we would report back on. And what would happen is we would start the Steel on Steel meeting with prayer. We would start the Steel on Steel meeting with meditation. We would read the format. And what I'll do is I'll throw the format in the chat after I'm done talking, because I'm pretty good at multitasking, but I'm not that good. But we would meet and we'd go through that process. And then one at a time, we would answer these questions on this question sheet. We would only have 10 minutes to share. And it would start with the circle and the triangle, and it would ask, are you proportionally involved in all three sides? Do you have a sponsor? Do you have sponsees? What does your daily prayer, daily meditation practice look like? What does your evening review practice look like? It would ask me and hold me accountable to the daily program of action of the 12 steps. And I would report back on the actions that I have taken. And then it would ask me about my unity. How many meetings am I going to? Am I connecting with others? What about service? Am I a member of my home group? Do I have a service commitment? And then it would get into other areas of our lives. Relationships, family, work, all these, health even. And we get into all these areas of my life. And I want to share two things. The first thing I want to share is one of the things that I noticed in myself and watching for years, different groups of us doing Steel on Steel. If we were proportionally involved and we were doing the deal in the first part of those 10 minutes, the circle and the triangle, everything else worked out. There wasn't a whole lot of family problems. There was not a whole lot of work problems. Everything was okay. But also what we would find is if it was out of whack and disproportionate in that specific area, the circle and the triangle, wouldn't you know it? There's problems there are problems all over the place. Problems all over the place. So experientially, what I come to find out is that when I put recovery, which is to say the 12 steps, and being involved in service and being involved in unity, when I make that a priority, I don't ignore my family, I don't ignore my other responsibilities. But keep in mind, if I do not have all 12 steps, I will relapse. So I have to put that first. That everything else really does just work out. But the other thing that I want to talk about, Steel on Steel, not an endorsement, just my experience as it pertains to the symbol, is that Steel on Steel held me accountable. And sometimes this girl needs a little bit of accountability. And it got me to work the program with the rigorousness, with the seriousness that my illness demanded. And I began to work the 10th step, the 11th step, and to really do this as a way of life. And what happened for me was a change that I did not imagine possible. I've been sober a while, but the change that happened after I began to dive in, after I began to do this as a way of life, man, that was indescribable. My experience is that little voice in the back of my head that I had as long as I can remember that said, if it gets bad enough, you can kill yourself. That voice that I never thought could ever go away, that voice that I thought was integral to who I was, that voice that was best case scenario on my shoulder, you should kill myself, as opposed to actively and intentionally suicidal, which is how I lived most of my life. That was gone. That was gone. And what I began to find is that there's not a glass ceiling on this thing. What I mean by that is there is no limit to the spiritual awakenings that I get to have, that I get to continue to grow. Man, I don't gotta settle. I don't know about you, but there is not a time in my life. Oh, my last one. And I'll tell you that wasn't settling. But I was gonna say there's not a time in my life that I settled for one hoot of crack. You know what I'm saying? There's not a time in my life that I settled for one drink. There's not a time in my life that I settled for one pill. Do you know what I'm saying? Why would I settle for one experience? And that's at least my experience. So that's the title page. Just did a reasonable amount of time on that. And what we'll do is we'll skip over the contents. But what I'll just say about the contents very, very briefly, we don't need to read it through. But what we're seeing is we're sectioning the book into two sections. There are the diagnostic criteria of alcoholism, which also addiction, but also the directions on how to get well, which we refer to as the first 164 pages, but it also involves the doctor's opinion. And we've got wonderful information in the preface and forwards. And then the second section, which is personal stories. So there are two sections to this book. All right, let's dive into the preface. And I this was a couple years ago. I was working with a sponsee who said, Paige, it's actually called Preface, to which I could assure her it was absolutely not. But if you call it Preface, if you call it Preface, I'm just glad you're here. Call it whatever you want. Just make sure we study it. Am I right? Yeah. All right, Preface. So it says this is the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So again, I want to emphasize this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. That is what this book is called. And it said the first edition appeared in April 1939. So it was first went out to the world April of 1939. And in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. If you're writing in your book, which why wouldn't you? I hear it's what all the cool kids are doing, make a little note for that 300,000 copies. Underline it, circle it, highlight it, do whatever you want. But we are going to come back to that number. And I'm not going to say we, because if I say we are going to do some math, none of you guys will come back. I will do the math. I won't make it. We lost one. They didn't want to do math. I won't make anyone do math. I will be doing the math. Okay. But we got to stick around for the math portion of this. So from the first edition to the second edition, 300,000 copies of this book went into circulation. The second edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The third edition, which came off the press in 1976, achieved a circulation of approximately 19.5-ish million in all formats. I want you to know I've been doing big book studies for years. I mean, for a long, long time. And I've still not learned how to say that number properly. I just go 19.5-ish million every single time. Just a little bit of honesty and transparency for you guys. Alrighty. So what we see is that more and more and more of the books are going out to the world. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us there's a solution here, because people are not buying books that are not helpful, that are not useful. Do you know what I mean? It's an indication that there is a solution contained within this book. It goes on to say, because this book has become the basic text, and I want to make a note of basic text, because what this book is a textbook. Now, my sponsor, he's God bless him, he's funny. He's like, well, it's a textbook, Paige. It's not meant to be exciting. But it's me, so I get just so excited about it, and I can't stop myself. But what is a textbook? A textbook is a book that is meant to be learned from, that is meant to be studied. And it's also, let's imagine, some of you are like, textbook, I didn't even open those in school. You know what I mean? Didn't have a look at those. And some of you are like, you already mentioned math. Could you stop giving me high school flashbacks? I'm not here for this at this study. But if you think about a book like a chemistry book, that book is going to give us information, right? And so this book is going to give us information on what it means to be an alcoholic, which to extrapolate to those in Cocaine Anonymous, what it means for us to be an addict. So it's going to give us that information. But then in a chemistry book, it is going to give us experiments. And that is what we can do, is we can run this book like an experiment. I can follow the directions of this book and see if I can get the result that is described. Now, the result that is described is the promises, not just the 9th step, not just the 10th step, all of them. That is the result that comes from this book. And the most incredible thing about this is we can go back to, in our minds, like high school chemistry. Imagine, and some of this is not too hard to imagine. Some of it might be a little hard to remember because it's been a while and we've done some damage since then. But you can imagine maybe not being the most jazzercise to be doing your chemistry experiment. You're like, I'd rather be smoking in the smoke pit, and I want to look at the cute boy, or, whatever it is, like you're not excited to do the experiment. Heck, you might have a chemistry professor that's a real jerk, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be in class. And so you're showing up and you've got not great motives. You don't really want to do it. You've got some attitude because we're teenagers in our little memory and in this hypothetical. But what happens? What happens if I run the experiment as it's outlined in the book, even with garbage motives, even with garbage attitudes, but if I follow the directions, I will get the result. And it's the exact same with this book. Similarly, if I skip class to go flirt with the boy and smoke in the smoke pit, I will get a result, but it's not going to be the chemistry result. It's not going to be the result of the experiment. So for those of us that are maybe resistant to the idea of this work, or resistant to this book, or resistant to the ideas, I don't have to believe. I just need to do. And that is good news. The steps don't matter what I think of them, what I feel about them, what I believe about them. That matters what I do. So if I take the actions, I will get the results. So it says, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. So what it's saying is we don't like to make changes in the big book. And the reason is because it works. It works. The directions on how to get well work. And keep in mind, as addicts, we like to change, we like to fiddle with, you get more people joining this meeting, people want to fiddle with the format, we love to make it our own. But when it comes to the first 164 pages, as a culture, there's no, we don't want to touch it, we don't want to mess with it. And the reason is because it works. And I want to emphasize the results speak for themselves. I don't have to buy in, but I can see that it works. I don't have to like what it says, but I can see that it works. And that's why we do not want to change what is in the diagnostic portion and what is in the direction portion on how to get well. So it says there exists a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth editions. So the directions on how to get well, the diagnostic criteria has not changed. The section called The Doctor's Opinion, some of you guys were like, where are you going to start there? No, title page, whee! So the section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor. And we're going to talk about him because he is the doctor who gave us knowledge of what it means to be an alcoholic, which is to extrapolate what it means to be an addict. What does it mean to have this illness? So Dr. Silkworth gave us knowledge of what our problem is. Dr. Silkworth, he worked at a hospital called the Towns Hospital in New York City. It's right across the street from Central Park. Just if geography and like little mental visuals are helpful for you, that's what we're talking about. And so that Towns Hospital was focused on drug addicts and alcoholics. That's what that hospital was for, nothing else. And over his career, he oversaw, now it's report, Bill was like 50,000, so probably not 50,000, but oversaw up to 50,000 different alcoholics, different drug addicts. He was an expert in his field, and his expertise was based on experience. And he gave us the knowledge that I need to know in order to hit my step one. He gave us knowledge of my physical allergy and the mental obsession. So we'll go more into detail about that. So all of that has not changed. Now, what I will point out is a lot of people would, especially this study, oh, doctor's opinion, that is a logical place to start a big book study, because that really dives us into the first step and gives us first step information. I just like to do prefaces and forewords because I'm a nerd. And unfortunately, Paul asked me first. So I'm going to go through these. But you might be like, well, girl, why is the doctor's opinion not on page 1 if it's so freaking important? Well, it used to be. It used to be on page 1. And actually, I don't know if I can, for those that have their replica first editions, you don't need a copy of this. But in the replica first edition, you will see that the doctor's opinion was on page 1. Or actual first edition, if you got one of those, ooh, they expensive. Look at you, collector's item. And you might be like, okay, well, why would such information that is so important get moved? And you'll notice on page, oh, I just had it and I lost it. On page 2 of the first edition, it says, very truly yours, XXMD. And if we look at our 4th editions, or if you're fancy and you got a 3rd edition, it will be in Roman numerals and it'll say William D. Silkworth, MD. So the reason is when the first edition went out to the world, Dr. Silkworth was kept anonymous. His name was not attributed to the doctor's opinion. And then before the 2nd edition came out, he passed away. And so they added his name to the doctor's opinion. But in literary, I know it's like, oh, come for the hopeless state of mind and body. Stick around for learning about literary convention. Woo! But in writing a book, anyone who contributes to the numbered pages of any book is considered an author. And as soon as his name was put to it, he then would have to be considered an author. So it would be Alcoholics Anonymous, but also Dr. Silkworth. And so they had to move the doctor's opinion to the Roman numerals. I just wanted to throw that out for anyone that was like, oh, why is that there? And some of you are like, I wasn't thinking that page at all. That's reasonable. What is it like to have a mind that works more normally than mine? Tell me more about that. I'm over here like chasing squirrels. All right. So what has, to summarize that paragraph, what has not changed is the directions on how to get well. The diagnostic criteria for us, addiction, the directions on how to get well. So now let's look at what has changed. So it says the second edition added the appendices, the 12 traditions, and the directions for getting in touch with AA. So, as the fellowship grew, we had to cultivate traditions to keep the fellowship alive. And there had to be direction how to get a hold, and they had to add some appendices as more information came in. But the chief change, so this is what has changed in the book. The chief change, the main change, was in the section of personal stories, which was expanded to reflect the fellowship's growth. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this quickly. I am going to speed read this bad boy. But because what we are saying is the stories have changed. What has not changed is the directions. What have changed is the stories. And the reason the stories have changed is because when this book was published, it was 80 white dudes. And when I got here, I'd be like, old white dudes. I mean, like, probably white dudes my age. But like, I got here young. But it was these, like, middle-aged white dudes and one woman. One. Just the one. And she didn't stick it out. And so why would the stories change? Well, as people of different ages, backgrounds, races, cultures, genders, creeds began to get well, we wanted to share their stories so that I could come and so that I not even could come, but because in 2024, I can zoom into a meeting around the world and I can see addicts just like me. I can see addicts who are, dare I say young? Young, subjective. If you're younger than me, you're like, you're old. When I got sober, it was in my early 20s. Like, you're old in your 30s. And then anyone older than me is like, you're so young. So I'll take it. But that idea that people like me can recover. But this book was meant to go out to the world and succinctly carry the message. And I would need to know that people like me can get well and recover. So, all of that to say the stories have changed. Bill's story, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, and one other personal history from the first edition were retained intact. 3 were edited, and one of these was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written with new titles. 30 completely new stories were added, and the story section was divided into 3 parts under the same headings that are used now. In the 3rd edition, Part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 of the stories in Part 2, They Stopped in Time, were carried over from the 2nd edition. 8 new stories were added. In Part 3, They Lost Nearly All. 8 stories were retained, and 5 new ones were added. This 4th edition includes the 12 concepts for world service and revises the 3 sections of personal stories as follows. 1 new story has been added to Part 1, and 2 that originally appeared in Part 3 have been repositioned there. 6 of the stories have been deleted. 6 of the stories in Part 2 have been carried over. 11 new ones have been added and 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 new stories. 8 were removed in addition to the 2 that were transferred to Part 1. Stories have changed, is what that is saying. Now, one of the things I will point out is the 3 sections. So it has 3 sections in the personal stories. The first is the Pioneers of AA. So some of these historical stories of guys like Dr. Bob and Bill Dodson, AA number 3, and Fitz Mayo, our Southern friend. Some of these early people, we wanted to keep their stories. But the other 2 sections are really, really interesting. We've got the section They Stopped in Time and the section They Lost Nearly All. And I don't know if your experience is like my experience, but when I started to come to the rooms, I would do this thing. And actually, I know none of you guys would do this thing. None of you guys at Pocket Your Pride would ever. But I would do this thing, and it's called judging the speaker. You know what I'm saying? And I would hear some stupid jerk like me natter on for, like 45 minutes. And I'd think, whoa, I'm not as bad as her. I'm not as bad as her. And so I was looking for where I'm not as bad as you. I didn't go as far as you. And that's what They Stopped in Time is for. For those of us that come with that, I'm not as bad as you. And then here's what would happen to me as I'd hear the next person thinking, I'm like, whoa, I'm way worse than that guy. You don't know what I've done. I'm way worse than you, and I done this and blah, blah, blah. And you couldn't help me. And you'll notice that is what the stories They Lost Nearly All are for. That I'm so bad you couldn't help me. And the stories are meant to help crash through my denial, my andas, my yeah buts, I'm different, I'm not like you. That is the purpose of the stories. And that's why in Cocaine Anonymous, there's a story book that has just personal stories, because it is important. And that's also my responsibility, as a recovered member, to show up and to be an example, and for me to this is how I like to share my story. I like to do it in such a way whereas if you have the illness, you can't be like, oh, I'm different. You know what I mean? I'm not saying this is the right way. I'm not saying this is the best way. I'm just off on this tangent, so off we go. How I like to share is I like to focus on the symptoms. I focus on my allergy. I focus on my obsession. And oftentimes it can be really helpful, not diagnostic of the illness of addiction, but helpful to know about the spiritual malady. And that is what I'll focus on. Because if you have what I have, you're like, oh, girl. But if I tell you about what it's like to, be in Canada and be homeless, you're like, no, I'm not like you. We don't have snow. You know what I mean? Because that's how I was, So it says all of the changes made over the years in the big book. AA members' fond nickname for this volume. So again, this book is called Alcoholics Anonymous. Have had the same purpose: to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately and thereby to reach more alcoholics. And it says, if you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of those 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. And that's the message I'm called to carry. My story's not in the book. But I'm meant to share that story, that message of hope. You know, yes, I believe this thing can work for me too. All right, forward to the first edition. It says, this is the forward as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. And I love the forward to the first edition. The first paragraph of the forward to the first edition works really well as a preamble. A preamble, which is to say, explains what the fellowship is, what it's not, and what we're here to do. I love it. I love it. But I'll tell you, next week, my favorite forward to the second edition. Oh, it's a gooder. Oh, it's my fave. 'Cause I'm cool and fun at parties. You know, nothing says sexy like having a favorite forward. Obviously the second. If you don't like the forward to the second edition, you can't eat lunch with us. You can. I'm glad you're here and we love you very much. All right, so we of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I want to say is the We of Alcoholics Anonymous originally was referencing the first 180 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. But here's what I believe to be true. It's not super controversial because I want you to like me, but a little bit. What I believe is the more of us who follow the directions as outlined in this book, and the more of us that get the results that are promised in this book, the more of us that are included in the we. That I become a part of this we, because it is also my experience. So we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women, it was one, who have recovered. There is that word again. Make a note of recovered. Recovered. That is a promise that is given to us, recovered from a seemingly hopeless state. And I want to emphasize hopeless. As I go through this book, I always emphasize hopeless, because to be hopeless is to see the reality of my condition as an addict. To be hopeless is to see what I am, who I am, for as I really am. Hopeless. And when I am hopeless, it is only when I am hopeless that I will accept the hope that is on offer. Most people are not writing inventory because it sounds like a good idea. We're putting pen to paper because we've come to the end of ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's like, oh, you know what I can't wait to do? Amends, even to my ex. No, it's like I've run out of options. This is worst case Ontario, real bad scenario. I got to take this course of action. It is only when I see my hopelessness that I'm willing to accept the hope. So it says a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And when we talk about the seemingly hopeless state of body, that is, you can make a little note that is our physical allergy. Now, the physical allergy is what happens when I take a drink, what happens when I take a drug, what happens when I smoke whatever it is, usually crack, what happens when I take that substance and I feel that effect and I get that, and there's a switch that flips off in the back of my head and it tells me more. And the more I drink or the more that I use, the more that I need. See, I need one, or I take one and it demands a second. And that second insists on 4. And that 4th hit, hoot, high pill will not relent until I've had 8. And the 8th is screaming at me until I've had 16. You know what I'm talking about? I start and I can't stop. I start and I need more. I start and I drink and use until I burn it to the ground. I can't control it. That is my seemingly hopeless state of body. My seemingly hopeless state of mind, if you're writing in your book. And I hear that's what all the cool kids do. Peer pressure. But if you're writing in your book, when it says seemingly hopeless state of mind, what you can make a note is the mental obsession. And the mental obsession happens when I am physically abstinent, when I am sober. And it is a thought that happens in my mind that takes me back to the first drink, the first drug, the first hit, the first hoot, the first pill. Is that thought that this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I got to get it out of my system. My problem is booze, but I can smoke crack. My problem is crack, but I can drink booze. It was prescribed by a doctor. I can take it this time. Like whatever. If you're feeling the way that I was feeling, you'd have to get high too. It looks like F it, F you, F my sponsor, FCA, F it, right? It looks like get high, get high, get high, get high, get high, get high, until I finally go get high. It looks like a case of the Suddenlies. I'm going out living my life. I got a pipe in hand, a drink in hand, popping a pill, and I almost don't know how it happened. That is the mental obsession, and that is what makes my predicament hopeless. When I pair it with the physical allergy, I can't drink, I can't use, I cannot do it successfully, and holy moly, I'm going to do it again. That seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And so in this book, we see a theme, hopeless to hope. And we almost always start with the hopeless, and then we get the hope. And so this is the hope, the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I mean, we started with hope because we have recovered from that. That's the hope. I'm not there no more. To show other alcoholics precisely, and that is why we study this book, and that is why we go through line by line, word by word, to break it down, because I need the precise directions on how to get well. Precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So the main point of this whole book is to tell a silly little drunk and a silly little crackhead like me how I can get well and stay well. That is the point, and this is not a book. Now, I would, but this is not one of those trashy romance novels that you sit on the beach or sit by the pool and read on vacation. Although you can if you want. But really, this is a book to dive into, have an experience with. How can I recover? This is going to show me exactly how to recover. And it's just to show other alcoholics how we recovered. It is not this intellectual ivory tower. Here is what you have to do. No, let us show you what we have done. And I'm open to that. You know what I mean? Don't tell me what to do, but show me what you have done. You know what I'm saying? That we're open to that. So it says, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. What that means is we hope that as you go through this book, and we hope that as you go through this study, that you have these moments of have you been reading my diary? Or actually, it's Cocaine Anonymous. You know when you get into a little bit of the crack psychosis and you're like, there's people in the ceiling. It's like, were the people in the ceiling writing this book? You know what I mean? You guys know what's up. Yeah. It's like, how did you know? That's what it's saying when it says, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. The people spying on you in the ceiling are like, yes, that's what they're like. And we're like, how did they know? That. And it says, we think this account of our experiences. So this is a book based on experience, not on ideas, not beliefs, but experience. We think this account of our experience will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. And in our case, the addict. Many do not comprehend the alcoholic is a very sick person. This is a revolutionary idea that to be an addict is to be sick, which is to say unwell. That I am not bad, I'm not immoral, I'm not broken at the depth of my being, I'm not the biggest pile of garbage, waste of space that ever lived. I am up against an illness, now an illness over which I could not possibly have any power. Sick person. What a revolutionary idea. And I'll let you know it felt revolutionary when I heard that I was sick and not bad. And I resisted that. But I am sick, I am ill, I am unwell, but it demands treatment. And it says, and besides, we are sure, and this is important, underline this, that our way of living, these 12 steps are not a set it and forget it program. I talk a lot that I can't have crockpot sobriety, where you set it, forget it. I got to have stir fry sobriety, where I'm up there in it every day working it. And if you're wondering, she must do a lot of cooking. Nope, the microwave is my bestie. I'm not cooking much. But in the metaphor, I am. And it says, and besides, we're sure that our way of living, so this is a way of life. These 12 steps are the basis on how I live my whole life. And it says, has its advantages for all. For all. This works for all of us. So 4 minutes left. I'll leave it there. Over to you guys.